10 stories beneath the streets of Manhattan, deeper than the subway tunnels, deeper than the water mains and sewer lines. There is a room that doesn't exist. You won't find it on any official map. For decades, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority denied it was there at all. And during the darkest days of World War II, armed guards patrolled its corridors with orders to shoot anyone who entered without authorization. This is M42, the most secret basement in America, and the story of how a hidden room beneath Grand Central Terminal may have saved the world. To understand M42, you first have to understand Grand Central itself and the man who built it. In the early 1900s, the New York Central Railroad was one of the most powerful corporations in America. Its trains connected the eastern seaboard to the heartland, carrying passengers, freight, and the raw materials of an industrial nation. And at the center of this empire sat Grand Central Depot, a cramped and outdated station that had become a bottleneck for the entire system. The railroad's president, William J. Wilgus, had a vision. He wanted to tear down the old depot and build something unprecedented. A terminal so vast, so modern, so elegant, that it would redefine what a train station could be. But Wilgus faced a problem. Steam locomotives belched smoke and soot, making underground platforms impractical. The trains would have to stay at street level, limiting how much the station could expand. Then Wilgus had his breakthrough. What if the trains didn't run on steam at all? What if they ran on electricity? It was a radical idea. Electric locomotives existed, but no one had attempted to electrify an entire rail network on this scale. The engineering challenges were immense, but Wilgus saw the opportunity. Electric trains meant no smoke. No smoke meant the platforms could go underground. Underground platforms meant the railroad could sell the air rights above the tracks, creating an entirely new neighborhood of hotels and office buildings. The project would pay for itself. Construction began in 1903. For a decade, workers blasted through Manhattan schist, excavating millions of cubic yards of rock. They built not one, but 2 levels of tracks, an upper level for long-distance trains and a lower level for commuters. They installed miles of electrical conduit, thousands of feet of third rail, and one of the most sophisticated power distribution systems ever created. And at the very bottom, 10 stories below street level, they built M42. The room's purpose was simple, but critical. Grand Central's electric trains drew their power from a third rail, but that power had to come from somewhere. M42 housed the rotary converters, massive machines. That transformed alternating current from the city's power grid into the direct current the trains required. Without these converters, not a single train could move. Grand Central would go dark. The room itself was a cathedral of machinery. Rotary converters the size of small houses hummed and spun, their flywheels weighing tens of thousands of pounds. The air vibrated with electrical energy. Catwalks crisscrossed above the equipment, allowing engineers to monitor the systems. The ceiling soared overhead, necessary to accommodate the sheer scale of the machines. When Grand Central Terminal opened on February 2nd, 1913, it was hailed as an engineering marvel. The main concourse, with its celestial ceiling and towering windows, became an instant icon. Newspapers called it the greatest train station in the world, but almost no one knew about M42. The room was buried in technical documents, accessible only to authorized personnel. It was infrastructure, essential, but invisible. For 3 decades, 42 hummed along in obscurity. The converters spun, the trains ran. New York grew upward and outward, and Grand Central became the beating heart of the city's transportation network. Then came the war. On December 7th, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor, and the United States was plunged into World War II. Within weeks, the nation began mobilizing on a scale never seen before. Factories converted to war production, young men lined up at recruiting stations, and military planners began thinking about vulnerabilities. The critical points, where a single act of sabotage could cripple the war effort. Grand Central Terminal was one of those points. The station handled over 65 million passengers a year. More importantly, it was the hub of the northeastern rail network, connecting New York to the industrial centers of New England and the military bases of the eastern seaboard. Troops moved through Grand Central on their way to embarkation points. War materials flowed through on freight trains. If the terminal went down, the entire logistics chain would be disrupted. And the easiest way to bring down Grand Central was to destroy M42. The rotary converters were irreplaceable. Each one was custom-built, a unique piece of precision engineering that would take months, perhaps years, to manufacture. If saboteurs managed to destroy even a few of them, the terminal would be paralyzed. Trains would stop. Troops would be stranded. The war effort would stumble. Military intelligence understood the threat. German U-boats were already prowling the Atlantic coast, sinking ships within sight of American beaches. Nazi saboteurs had landed on Long Island in June 1942, carrying explosives and plans to attack war plants and transportation hubs. The FBI caught them before they could act. But the message was clear. The enemy was already here. M42 had to be protected. And so began one of the most secretive security operations of the war. The first step was to erase M42 from existence, at least on paper. References to the room were removed from public documents. Maps of Grand Central's lower levels were altered or classified. Workers who knew about M42 were warned never to discuss it. The room became a ghost, a blank space in the official record. Next came the physical security. Armed guards were posted at every access point, 24 hours a day. These weren't ordinary security personnel. They were military police, hand-picked for the assignment and given extraordinary authority. Their orders were explicit. Anyone who attempted to enter M42 without proper clearance was to be stopped. If they resisted, the guards were authorized to use lethal force. The guards carried Thompson submachine guns, the same weapons used by soldiers on the front lines. They patrolled the corridors in pairs, checking credentials, watching for anything suspicious. Engineers who worked in M42 underwent background checks and were issued special passes. Even senior railroad executives needed authorization to enter. But the military planners knew that guards alone might not be enough. A determined saboteur could find a way past them. So they focused on the most vulnerable component of the system, the rotary converters themselves. The converters ran on oil and water. Oil lubricated the bearings. Water cooled the machinery. Without both, the converters would overheat and destroy themselves. Within minutes, a saboteur didn't need explosives. A bucket of sand in the oil reservoir would be enough to bring the entire system down. To counter this threat, the military installed special protective covers over the oil and water intakes. The covers were locked, and only a handful of people had the keys. Sensors were added to detect contamination. Backup systems were put in place. Every possible vulnerability was identified and addressed. The security measures remained in place for the duration of the war, and they worked. M42 was never attacked. The converters kept spinning. The trains kept running. Grand Central continued to pump troops and materials to the front lines. When the war ended in 1945, the immediate threat faded, but the secrecy around M42 did not. The Cold War brought new fears: Soviet spies, nuclear attack, the possibility of World War III. Grand Central remained a critical piece of infrastructure, and M42 remained its most vulnerable point. The room was modernized over the decades. The original rotary converters, magnificent as they were, eventually became obsolete. Solid-state technology replaced spinning machinery. The cathedral of humming metal gave way to quieter, more efficient systems. But the security protocols remained. M42 was still classified, still guarded, still absent from official maps. For most of the 20th century, the room existed in a kind of institutional silence. Railroad workers knew about it, of course. You can't hide a 10-story basement from the people who maintain it. But they didn't talk about it. The culture of secrecy had become ingrained, passed down from one generation of workers to the next. M42 was simply not discussed. It wasn't until the 1980s and 90s that the story began to leak out. Journalists started asking questions. Historians dug through archives. Former workers, now retired, began to share what they knew. The MTA initially denied everything, then grudgingly acknowledged that, yes, there was a sub-basement beneath Grand Central, and yes, it had been classified during the war. But even today, access to M42 is tightly restricted. The room is not open to the public. It does not appear on the official Grand Central tour. Photographers who have managed to get inside report being watched closely, their movements tracked, their images reviewed. The MTA insists this is simply standard security for critical infrastructure. Perhaps it is. Or perhaps old habits die hard. What remains in M42 today is a mix of old and new. Some of the original rotary converters are still there, preserved as industrial artifacts. They no longer function, but they stand as monuments to an earlier age of engineering, an age when machines were built to be seen, when form and function were not yet divorced. Alongside them sit the modern systems that actually power the terminal: solid-state converters, digital controls, fiber optic cables. The room is cleaner now, quieter, more sterile, but it still carries the weight of its history, and it is still essential. Grand Central Terminal serves over 750,000 passengers on a typical weekday. Metro North Railroad, which operates the commuter lines, depends entirely on the power systems housed in M42 and its associated facilities. If those systems failed, the consequences would ripple across the entire New York metropolitan area. Hundreds of thousands of commuters would be stranded. The economic impact would be measured in billions. The military understood this in 1942. They understand it still. There is a particular kind of secrecy that attaches to infrastructure. We do not think about the systems that make our lives possible. The power grids, the water mains, the data centers humming. In anonymous buildings, we flip a switch and the lights come on. The machinery is invisible, and we prefer it that way. M42 is a reminder that this invisibility is sometimes deliberate, that there are rooms beneath our feet that we are not meant to know about. During World War II, military planners looked at Grand Central and saw a single point of failure, a place where a few determined men, with a bucket of sand, could bring a city to its knees. They responded with secrecy, with armed guards, with shoot-to-kill orders. The war ended. The guards stood down. But the room remained. 10 stories beneath Grand Central, the machines still hum. Above them, 750,000 people pass through every day, gazing up at the celestial ceiling, rushing to catch their trains. Almost none of them know what lies beneath their feet. And that, perhaps, is exactly how it should be. Some secrets are kept not out of shame, but out of necessity. M42 is proof that the most important things often work best when no one knows they exist. The next time you pass through Grand Central, remember, beneath your feet, the lights are still on because someone made sure they would be.